faith, family, freedom, hope, and opportunity. You're listening to Freedom Rings. I'm your host, Senator Blackburn. Welcome to another Freedom Rings. We are just so excited today to be able to bring to you somebody that is a filmmaker, an author, an activist, and she is using her platform to help and to encourage and teach others. And she and her husband have done a magnificent film, and it is the story of a teenage girl who is trafficked. The movie is titled 8 Days, and it is based on the stories and that are just so moving and sobering and thought-provoking, and she has really brought this to life and I think educated a lot of people about what happens with sex trafficking and human trafficking. Our guest today is Philipa Booyens. Her husband, Jaco Booyens, has worked with her. Now, those of you who follow Turning Point, these are going to be familiar names to you. Those of you who are looking for inspiring Christian books, this is going to be a familiar name to you because she has written Arise, Women of Influence. And I am just thrilled that she's taking time to join us today. All right, Philipa, welcome. We're delighted to have you.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn.
Thank you so much. Let's talk a little bit about 8 Days. Because, as I said, it is a heavy story. It is something that really, it turns out to be an inspiring and encouraging story, but it's almost on that dark side. So talk a little bit about, first of all, how you found the story, and then secondly, why you decided to film this.
Well, I'm from Tennessee, and I grew up in a very safe environment and had no idea any of this happened. And if I heard about it, I thought it happened overseas. And before we moved in 2010 to Dallas, Texas area, I started hearing about trafficking and that it was happening here. And when I moved to Texas, I just kept hearing about it. It just over and over again wouldn't leave me alone. And I had a mentor here who had an organization where she was combating trafficking in the U.S. So she was giving me a lot of information, and I didn't know what I could do about it. Mm-hmm. It was awful, and I didn't know what to do. And she knew I was a writer. So she gave me some stories, and I did a whole lot of research to help contribute to something she was working on from a writing perspective. And it's like, I have no idea. I don't know enough about this. I won't give this a fair job. But I just felt in my spirit that these stories needed to be told. It needed to be told from their perspective because it was important. It was called modern day slavery at the time. And now we're talking about freedom, and to be hit with, there are more slaves around the world than ever before was really awful to hear. And I knew that's something I could do to share their stories. And it wasn't just facts on a paper anymore. It was, getting it in front of people's faces. And then I took it to my husband, said, we need to show this. People need to see it and come face to face and feel what these victims are going through. So we took it to our Dallas community of filmmakers, because I'm like, look, I'm not a policymaker. I can't run a nonprofit that is social work and all these different things, but I can write. I can do that. And our entertainment community rallied around us, and we donated time and our talents to bring stories like this to life. And we worked with Homeland Security and different nonprofits around the U.S., culminating a lot of different stories. And I went with the story that was more close to home for me. And I felt like my community needed to be aware of this. So I went with a girl that came from more of my community. and then showcased more of what's going on in for different girls and different forms of trafficking too. So that's what we did. We did that in 2013. So it's been a while, and it's been a crazy ride to see what God's done with that small little project.
And thankful. When you were filming, it had to be heavy and difficult so as you were filming. Was it just draining every day?
Well, writing it is I have to feel it. If I don't feel it, then I don't think it has a chance of moving anybody else. So I was crying a lot just reading stories all across the United States. And then to see it, it's worse. It's worse than just reading it. And we were very careful. We had counselors on set, and we were real modest as we could be in our clothing and in our language, with it still being realistic. But it was very heavy. We had counselors all through the process, but it should be heavy. It's not something that's okay. And if we're not showing that aspect of it, how is it going to move anybody else or resonate with any
and this
survivors
is one
that
of
have gone through
those
that?
It's one of those hard truths. We have to admit it is happening so that we can then do something about it. You had DHS agents on site, and they got a tip during the filming. And
yes, so we were so blessed to have Homeland Security working with us. They actually edited my script, and I remember they told me, this is not realistic. I'm like, well, please help me. This is all I know. You're in it every day. So they edited some of their scenes that they would be a part of. They were actually acted in the film, and they trained our actors too. So we were as educated as we could be from some of the top people to portray this. And yes, they got a tip on set. They actually, we had to move locations. So we weren't supposed to be at this location. We asked them what would be a good motel to film at that would be realistic. They gave us this one. And while we're filming this particular rescue scene, they got a tip to look for a particular girl they had been looking for a while. And they found suspects there and were able to help move that case forward and rescue the girl. So God's timing and God's provision to be able to move all those pieces into play. And it really brought it, made it real for everyone involved. Because, we're playing movies, but trying to bring this to life, but to really see it happen while you're filming was impactful.
I'm certain that was impactful. And I think your film is used as kind of a training film for officers and healthcare workers and people that are not familiar with what happens when someone is trafficked. And I think that's part of the realism of 8 days.
Yeah, and we've been very blessed to do that, which is really cool, because there wasn't anything at the time, especially, that showed what this could look like. And it's hard to just go from stats. It doesn't look real. A lot of language has changed since we started doing this. We used to use the term prostitute a lot, and now we're changing the name to anyone under 17 and under is now considered a victim. So there was a lot of things that had to change. And I think being able to show people what this looked like was really impactful. And we took it around the nation. We took it to different agencies, a lot of police departments, schools, churches. We still use it there. But we took it internationally to South Africa and the Dominican Republic too. And I just heard this year, it would have been 2015, we took it to South Africa. And my husband was speaking and showing the film with our group. And Demi Tebow, who's Tim Tebow's wife, she was watching it at the time. He just met her this year, and she told us the story. So she was watching my husband talk about this, and that from that news segment, she picked fighting trafficking as her platform. And as a pageant girl, and she won. And now she's married to Tim Tebow, and they have a foundation fighting trafficking. In the Dominican Republic too, we spoke there and had brothels shut down after we left. So I'm astounded with what's come out of this. And so many good organizations are coming out of this too and are doing so many good things. And it takes a lot of people. It takes policymakers and everyone to really combat this crime.
And for people that are watching Freedom Rings, listening to Freedom Rings, what they're going to say is, I want to do something. So how do they get involved? What is something that they themselves can do?
Well, it starts at home. You need to learn. We have several nonprofits that are very educationally based because we're working on awareness. We want to prevent a lot of this from happening because we got to the point where we can make arrests and we can rescue victims, but there's just more and more. We've got to stop this. And that's kind of where we're at in our battle is we want to stop this from happening. And we're working with policymakers, but it takes everybody. It takes the writer, it takes the filmmaker, it takes the teacher. It starts at home. You need to know what this looks like. We have several ministries, Jaco Booyens ministries.org. We have a lot of educational materials, and sharetogethernow.org, where you can give your time and your resources and just like services, things you do every day. You could be a hairstylist, you could be a writer or a chef, and you can donate your services to help victims or to help other people in need. So, but it also starts in the home too. You need to know what's going on with your kids, with your family, with your friends, and it goes out from there and into your schools and your churches and your communities. But you really have to start noticing what's going on in yourself. And there's ways that we contribute to trafficking too. Had to learn and battle a lot of pornography, which is a very, it's very prevalent and very accepted, but there's so many victims involved in the pornography industry, and a lot of victims are groomed through pornography, and these predators are just profiting off of it, and we're consuming it oftentimes without even knowing it. So being aware of that and stop consuming pornography would be really helpful.
You know, it's so interesting to me that you and Jaco really spend your time focusing on delivering people from oppression and moving them to a point of freedom in their lives. So what does freedom mean to you?
Well, I believe that we are endowed by our Creator God and that all men and women are created equal, and I really do want to set people free from all types of bondage. I grew up with a lot of depression. You know, bondage looks different for people. It could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be sexual abuse and trafficking. But I feel like I want to see that for all people. And I think that's what our nation stands for. So.
Indeed, it does. And you've given the two websites. Are you on social media for people to follow, or go to the websites?
I am Philipa Booyens. I know it's an interesting different name. At Philipa Booyens is my Instagram. And then I'm Philipa A. Booyens on Facebook. My husband's on there as well. Jaco Booyens, JacoBooyens.
There you go. Well, thank you for joining us for Freedom Rings. And for our audience, you can pull Freedom Rings down wherever you pull down your podcast. Philipa, thank you ever so much for the great work that you're doing. We are all proud of you and appreciate the contribution that you make to really giving a better life to people every single day. Thanks for joining us on Freedom Rings. Thank you for listening to this episode of Freedom Rings. You can follow me on Twitter at Vote Marsha, Facebook at Marsha Blackburn for Senate, and on Instagram at Team Marsha. And you can always find us online at marshablackburn.com. The Freedom Rings podcast is edited and produced by Jared Cummings. Executive producers are Conservative Partnership Center and Marsha Blackburn. Together, we make Freedom Ring.